Jim Wallis, and I'm with Sojourners here in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Richard Land, and I'm the head of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the public policy arm of Southern Baptist, which is the largest Protestant denomination in the country. Jim and I are going to talk about the budget, talk about the budget ceiling, the debt and the budget ceiling, and the budget crisis in Washington, and to some degree how that impacts the health care debate. I call it a crisis because we're borrowing 42 cents of every dollar that our federal government spends. I look upon that as a moral issue. It's generational theft. We're stealing our children and our grandchildren's future by that level of borrowing. It cannot be sustained. It will foreclose our children's economic prospects and our grandchildren's economic prospects. They'll spend most of their productive lives paying off our debts unless we get this debt monster under control and get federal spending under control, and do so quickly.
Well, I always enjoy talking with you, Richard, about these things, and we sometimes come at them from different places, but often find some common ground, and I hope we can on this too. I want to start by saying that a budget is a moral document, whether it be around a family table or in the halls of Congress. And I agree with you that a deficit, the amount of debt that we have, is a moral issue. I've got an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I don't want them to be saddled with terrible debt. I also think how you resolve, how you reduce deficit, how you do it, is a moral issue too, on whose backs that burden falls. So I'm glad to be part of a broad effort now called the Circle of Protection. The bishops, Catholic, the Catholic Conference is involved in this, the National Association of Evangelicals, Salvation Army, Sojourners, Bread for the World, many of us. And we're saying that spending on poor people is not what caused this deficit. That's not how it came about. And we don't think the burden should fall on the poorest and most vulnerable. So we want there to be a circle of protection from the faith community around the poorest and most vulnerable. Because as you know, Richard, the debts and budgets, these are moral choices we're making.
Well, they are. But I have to take issue, Jim, with one thing you said. You said that the poor are not the reason for this deficit. They're one of the major reasons for it. We paid last year $700 billion in federal money in means-tested welfare and aid programs, mostly as a result of single parenthood. Single parenthood is the largest cause of poverty in the United States. Children who grow up with two parents have enormous advantages in our culture, and unfortunately, they are now a minority. That's a moral issue. We have allowed fathers to walk away from their responsibilities to the children they've sired and the mothers they've married or the mothers they've cohabited with without much penalty. We need to talk about getting rid of no-fault divorce, for starters. That would help. And we need to talk about
Richard. You and I are both for marriage.
But it's a moral and an economic issue, Jim. $700 billion a year in means-tested welfare services, mainly to replace absent fathers and what they would provide for their families.
Well, I don't think those numbers are correct. Just to start.
Well,
this deficit
trust me, they are.
This deficit was caused by financing 2 wars off the books. 2 wars.
Well, that's not true. That's not true, Jim.
$120 billion a year in Afghanistan.
That's not true, Jim.
And the tax cuts for the wealthy. Half the deficit is because of tax cuts for the wealthy and 2 wars financed off the books.
The budget deficit, Jim, has increased by over 4% since Mr. Obama took office. It took us from George Washington through George Bush to get the national debt we have, and it will double in 8 years under Obama's spending. It's Obama's spending that has sent us over the edge.
Richard, that's just a partisan statement. The budget, we had a surplus under Bill Clinton, a surplus. When George Bush came in, we had a surplus. And when George Bush financed 2 wars off the books and gave tax cuts to the wealthiest people in the country, that's half our deficit.
Well,
and Obama has come in, it has increased under Obama.
Dramatically.
It's been Bush and Obama. I'm just saying, let's put everything on the table. Military spending, revenues, entitlements, all that. I'm saying who should not be on the table is the poorest and most vulnerable. That we've added those numbers up too. It's no more than 20% of this. And in fact, the international, the cuts, like 10.4 million, malaria bed nets are being cut. Those cost almost nothing. So a lot of folks, Catholic bishops, National Association of Evangelicals, a lot of us across the spectrum are saying that the most effective and critical programs for the poorest among us is not what should be targeted here. They didn't cause this, and they shouldn't bear the burden.
As you say,
for it.
everything should be on the table. And we could start with the $200 million in the $200 billion that Senator from Oklahoma required the Congressional Budget Office and the General Accounting Office to come up with waste and duplication of spending. They came up with $200 billion in 38 federal programs that are waste and duplicates. For instance, the Department of Commerce. Now that they don't do the census anymore, I'm not sure what the Department of Commerce does. It spends $34 billion. I'm not sure what it does.
Yeah, let's agree that we're going to cut waste. The biggest waste, everyone will tell you, is in the military, the Pentagon. The biggest, most wasteful spending is military spending. So I want someone to say out loud, you can say it now, that every line item of military spending is more important than 10.4 million malaria bed nets.
Well,
I don't think we can say that.
No, I think there's no budget that's ever been conceived that can't take a 5% across the board cut. I guarantee you there's 5% waste in every program that the government is using. And we could start by a 5% cut, say, okay, we want every department of government to come up with 5% cuts in the next year. And I believe they could do so without any serious problem in delivery. Now, you talked about entitlements, Jim. We're going to have to talk about entitlements. And because the entitlements are at an unsustainable level. And the reason is we have one size fits all entitlements. And we can no longer afford those. We're going to have to find a way to, I don't know whether you want to call it means test or whether you want to call it taxing the benefits of those who are wealthier, but people who have other retirement that they've gotten through their companies or through IRAs, people who have other retirement income are going to have to get less from Social Security than the people.
We could agree.
And same thing with Medicare.
Uh-huh.
We're going to have to, at the very least, say, okay, if you have a retirement income of a certain amount, then let's say every $10,000 that your income is above a certain amount, then you're going to have to pay an extra $500 for your Medicare. Or you're going to get that deducted
Richard,
by $500.
Entitlements.
We can't afford
entitlements should be on the table. I agree. Entitlements should be on the table. For example, the Social Security tax level is way too low. If we just raise that ceiling and tax more of the income of wealthy people, we could probably solve that issue. What I'm saying, I'm very narrowly focusing here. We have choices. For example, let me give you a choice. $8.5 billion in low-income housing is on the cutting block. $8.4 billion, same amount of money, is being kept for mortgage deductions